We've got Justin Burch here, the Rigby High School strength coach, and after a quick conversation with him, a lot more than that. Justin, welcome. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna I'm gonna have you just give a quick kind of bullet point history of your experience and what you're bringing to the table over there at Rigby High School.
Okay. So I was born in Utah and grew up playing 3 sports there and got really into baseball, basketball, and football and grew up playing those. I went on an LDS mission, and after my mission, I felt like I wanted to play sports still. So I walked on at Weber State. And at the time, this was a long time ago. So at the time, I was a gray shirt practice squad guy. And I was kept around because of my size, and I was able to help with the practice squad and help in that way. But I had good size and I liked to lift and stuff. And that's where I first got introduced to strength and conditioning as a career, as a possible career. John Henderson was the head strength coach at Weber State at the time. He's over at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh now. Hendo was kind of the one that made me realize, oh, that's something I could do eventually. And after some years of trying a few different careers and not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do, I went back to school at BYU, Idaho, and I met a guy there at BYU, Idaho. His name's Stephen Kimple. And Kimple was a college strength and conditioning coach at Wabash University, and then I believe it was Colorado Mesa. And he was in the college strength and conditioning and college wrestling coaching for 15 plus years. And as a professor at BYU, Idaho, introduced me to we took a couple classes with him that were strength and conditioning focused. And he introduced me to the idea of coaching college strength and conditioning and making it a full-time job the way he had. So when it came time to start doing like internships and stuff and wrapping up my degree, I was able to get an internship at University of Utah. And then while I was at University of Utah, it was like my first week there at University of Utah and interning with Cody Lockling and Parker Teagle and John Webster and their Olympic strength coaching staff. They made me realize like I didn't have much experience and I needed to get a lot more. So then I went and interned simultaneously at Weber State University. So I would wake up early and go intern and coach the athletes at Weber State and then drive across town basically to University of Utah and intern there for 7-8 hours in the evenings, towards the evenings. And then from there, I went to Grand Canyon University as a graduate assistant strength coach. And then I was full-time for my last couple months there and got my master's degree in health and wellness and was coaching their swim and dive programs, their golf programs. I helped coach with volleyball and basketball there at Grand Canyon University as well. And then with some family stuff, I went to Twin Falls. So we moved from Arizona to Twin Falls, Idaho. In Twin Falls, I was able to work at Canyon Ridge High School and start a strength and conditioning program there where I was working with all their athletes. And we were in my school schedule as a teacher was to have all of our athletes come through the weight room in the gym and train. And then while at Canyon Ridge, I was able to meet some coaches and people at Rigby and able to come over to Rigby High School where I'm at currently and doing basically the same thing I was doing at Canyon Ridge. I'm technically a PE certified teacher, but my classes are strength and conditioning sessions all day. And that's what I do all day. I get about 250 of our athletes here at Rigby through the weight room every day, and we do a variety of sprinting, jumping, extensive and intensive plyometrics. We do a lot of sprinting and we do a lot of strength training in addition to all that. So that's where I'm at currently. This is year 2 at Rigby.
Yeah.
And I do work a lot with our football program. That's the program that I'm the most involved in. Like I travel with them and do on the field stuff with warm-ups and whatnot with them as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for those that aren't in Idaho, Rigby has been absolutely crushing it. They got a forward-thinking mind in terms of their strength and conditioning and implementation. So that's awesome. What's cool is actually unpacking, like just listening to you, is a lot of commonalities. My co-owner at HansenAthletics is Shelton. He played at Weber State, and I'm pretty sure, and he helped in the weight room, and that's what made him fall in love with the idea of the career. And I'm pretty sure you guys might have had the same strength coach. So Like there's similarities between that and your story. And then I actually helped out at University of Utah as well with Cody. So there's
He's
just,
the man.
yeah, there's just some like awesome connections between our background that we didn't really know before. So that's cool. And one thing that popped into my mind, man, is like, and this isn't even what we were going to talk about today, but like your story is cool, how you got into it. You know, it led you to a career, and a lot of that had to do with you having an opportunity to like come back from the mission and walk on at the collegiate level and like experience that. And now with like the new JUCO and the transfer portal and the NIL, it's just, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? It's just a sad to see because there's a lot of kids I've heard great stories, or even just professionals that got into what they're doing because somebody gave them a shot to like walk on and get involved.
Right. I think it almost seems like the Division II and Division III level is what the D1 FCS and kind of the smaller Division I schools used to be. So, and I was only at Weber State the 1 year I was there, and then I had my oldest daughter while I was during spring ball, actually, while I was playing at Weber. And so I was only there the 1 year, but that's what gave me the taste. Was able to make the contact in Coach Hendo, and I've contacted him since playing and stuff, and that's really what started my path into strength and conditioning. And so it's frustrating because this with the transfer portal, the JUCO kids like me that I wasn't heavily recruited out of high school. I was a 3-sport athlete. I'm 6'3" and 225, 230. And when I got home from my mission, I was able to go walk on because I had some athletic ability and stuff, but I wasn't recruited well. So I had to have that walk on option. And so I think now it's going to end up being Division II and Division III is the place that you're going to see those kids, those kind of people, which luckily it seems like most Division II, Division III, and NAIA programs are adding strength and conditioning as a component and adding more assistance with their sports staffs. It seems like that's growing a little bit, or has grown in the last 7 years since I've like started the strength and conditioning path, right? But it's still small. It's still hard to get in the door. It's still strength and conditioning, especially, is a very oversaturated field.
For sure.
And so and then now the transfer portal and then the college athletes, like it's saturated. It's going to have to be the Division II, Division III level. And NAIA is a way to get in the door and either get some playing experience so that you can go into coaching, or other avenues through athletics. Because there's a lot of different jobs that your playing experience can help lead to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just imagine JUCO D2, D3 is going to start getting a lot more competitive too, because that's going to be like
No
where a
doubt.
lot of kids, especially like our Pocatello kids, where they're, they're getting in these schools right now, but it's going to get more competitive for those spots. It'll kind of be like a feeder league, like hockey, for example, into potentially getting into the bigger D1 universities, right? So, yeah, it's super interesting. You're right on the nail on the head. Like as that happens, I'm sure those programs will develop more. Like we send out a lot of kids that are really unhappy with their strength and conditioning, or they don't have it at all when they go to these smaller schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
And
doubt.
the last thing I'd highlight too, for like, we have some athletes that listen to this and their parents, like that level, that's going to be more realistic for a lot of athletes here in the next 2, 3, 4 years. It also, you need good grades, because a lot of times they can't give you a full scholarship based on your athletic play. You have to have some good grades and get some academic help, because those schools tend to be more expensive too. So just keep that in mind, like as you're developing your athlete. Like obviously it makes sense, we should be focused on school. That's the point of high school, right? But as sports get more and more popular, you just see kind of kids letting that slip and really focused on the sports side. But I think it'll be important that you have some good grades, even more so as we go into the future. So I want to jump into one topic you said you're pretty passionate about, you could talk about quite a bit, is kind of long-term athletic development. So I'll let you kick off on that, on your thoughts on that, and particularly like let's context it to, you get an athlete in high school as a freshman, and then what does that journey look like as they start to get older, junior, senior, start playing varsity, start getting recruited, stuff like that.
Yeah. Really, so long-term athletic development is looking at the big picture and looking at the athlete as how can I help them get the most out of their high school experience. Most of our athletes, it feels like nowadays, feel like they can try to play at the next level, especially if they're a kid that's starting varsity, or playing a varsity role, they can get there. But your JV and younger athletes, oftentimes, like, they're not worried about playing at the next level. They're trying to get onto the field. They're trying to make varsity, or they're trying to progress to the next level. So it's no matter where somebody's at, as far as athletic development goes, I'm not talking about like skill development for the sport, just talking about their body, their mobility, and their speed, their power, the amount of force they can generate, and their ability to run fast, jump high, and be resistant to injury. So even if I have a freshman that is going to go play varsity right away in whatever sport it is, they're going to start on the same level as whether boys or girls are going to start at the same level as they're a 14-year-old athlete. They're not, in my eyes, like they're a 14 to 18-year-old athlete. They're not a varsity basketball player, because there's still things we can produce. Now, some of our really good athletes obviously have physical qualities, that they have good DNA and genetics, and they're going to be well-rounded, or they're going to be naturally strong or naturally fast. But those long-term athletic development qualities of speed, power, and strength, we can develop those over time, and everybody's going to start at ground zero as a freshman in high school with me. And even before that, we do some stuff with our 8th graders. So we're all going to start at the same level. And that's going to be making sure that we can move with really good quality and have good mobility and can work in a full range of motion. And then on top of that, then we're going to slowly start adding strength, but we're going to do it in an appropriate manner for a 14 to 18-year-old athlete. One of the biggest things that I hate is seeing on Instagram or Twitter where you have kids that are obviously young athletes and they're elite athletes, but they get thrown into programs that it's pretty obvious they're not ready for. They're doing advanced training that collegiate professional athletes are doing when they're probably not even able to do simple things well. And so I think for us, our focus for our freshmen and sophomores is to master the basics and get really good at those things. And then moving into developing the qualities of strength and power as a junior and senior. So our first year, my freshmen, our biggest focus is movement quality. I don't really care about maxes or anything of that nature. We do kind of a bastardized Michael Yessie's 1x20 programming, and then we build from there. And our sophomores do we just add to it, a similar program with the 1x20. And then we move on in our junior and senior year. That's when we're really focused on some of the hypertrophy and power aspects that those athletes may need. I treat everybody like 14 to 18-year-old athletes, not like a football player or basketball player, because most of the qualities, the physical qualities they need are universal for any 14 to 18-year-old young man. Could probably add more size. There's very few cases where they need to cut weight anyway. And for female athletes, like, they need to add strength. That's what they need. Typically the quality that almost universally all high school athlete girls could get stronger. And so that's how we treat it and approach it. And then doing it with the big picture in mind as well. So it's more than just learning to move well in the weight room, but we do speed and agility stuff before and after school. We do it during our sessions, during class, and we're working on mechanics of jumping and running as well, especially sprinting. We try to do that a lot from a very young age and start with basic stuff like sprint mechanics as freshmen. Our freshman football team, it's boring and it's long, but we do a lot of mechanical work and working on just positions where should our knees, hands, and hips be when we're sprinting. And then we progress from there into doing more sprints and developing the qualities to help them build force and drive force into the ground and become really fast sprinters and gain speed. So it's in a broad spectrum. It's it's the speed, strength, and stuff, but we're starting with movement quality and then moving forward through their 4 years, trying to maximize year over year. Once we have good movement quality, then we can start adding strength, and then we can start developing power and focus on moving really fast and really powerfully.
Yeah, I love it. There's like a couple things I want to highlight in that for the listeners. And number one, just reemphasizing that, and we believe the same thing. It's kind of that slow cook of the athlete, right? So we're fortunate because we, in our private sector, I mean, I get some kids from 6th grade all the way through high school. So it's really about, preparing these athletes in the proper manner, like you spoke about, and focusing first on, movement quality, understanding how to lift, just teaching them how to train and what training should look like without really an emphasis on how much weight do they lift. Like, not a lot of metrics, not a lot. It's just like, okay, let's move well and let's start to build this base so that as they get older and start to incorporate strength training, first they can control their body. Now they can control weight, a barbell. And then over time, you can start to get into the metric stuff. But it's really about building that base. And, we don't really start emphasizing a lot of, first off, we don't ever do like max lifts. Everything, once we get into actually tracking for our juniors and seniors a little bit more intently, it's more like bar velocity, mid-thigh isometric pulls, speed metrics, acceleration. So there's a lot of different ways for them to be successful in the gym and find enjoyment every day, but also they're not just tracking the number on the bar and, maybe pushing it too much so where we don't have a lot of injuries at all, because we're kind of focused on, like you said, that long-term athlete development. And I think building the base is super important. Like, our most successful athletes, really, we've gotten calls from athletes at the University of Utah, Oregon State, from their strength coaches and saying, like, whatever you guys did, it was great. All we were trying to do is create like this very proficient athlete that can move well with some exposure to what we know is at the next level. And our job is not to get really specific with them. It's like, let's send them off to that college where they're just like ready to go in whatever direction they want to take them. And then from there, they can get a little bit more into what their theme is for their team, right? But we just got to prepare them to step into that and be ready to be successful right away and be moldable in the direction that the program wants them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of like what we're all about.
One of my biggest pet peeves is to have parents of like a freshman kid tell me they want their son or daughter doing more sports specific stuff. And it
Yeah.
kind of goes into what you said. And I'll straight up just be like, yeah, we'll do specific stuff for their sport. And because in general and base building stuff is what will be help them with their sport. And so I think you hit the nail on the head, is that the sport specific training, or if you want to get really specific to specific attributes for athletes, that should be done at the college level, where one, they have more resources usually at the college level, and they have their sports science staffs, especially at the Division I level, like they have the sports science staff, the strength coaches, they have the full-time athletic training department. They have all of those things to use so they can track every little thing that they want. The top college swim programs in the country are testing blood as soon as athletes get out of the water to see what lactate levels are like. They have those resources to do that and to see where every little metric is. But at this level, it's build the base. Like the Vermeil hierarchy of building that big general preparation base, like that's what I'm focused on. And that is, for a 14 to 18-year-old athlete, that is specific training, because that's what they need to be, one, resilient from injury, but two, to build a base to develop the qualities of speed and power and whatnot.
Yeah. 100%. Like, we always, when we have parents kind of bring that up, is, it's really, like you said, like, we have cheerleaders all the way to football, to swimmers, to, man, we have a dance academy that brings some athletes in, ballet dancers. Like, the work that we do helps all of them in all their different sports. And we're not doing, really, all our principles are staying consistent with all these different athletes. There's universal carryover, and it's all about, like, think about movement, and there's basic movement patterns. And the most athletic looking athletes on the field are just masters of the basic movement patterns, and they can put them into combinations. Like, that's what athleticism is. Like, if you need to give it a definition, is like being able to, consistently put together proficient movement patterns and then add an element of reaction, right? And then it's like you're one of the best athletes on the field. So I love that because I also like when somebody's like, oh, I want to do something that's like sport specific, we just nod our head and smile as well. But really, A, now's not the time. And B, even at my experience at the college level, they're still hitting the same stuff we're doing, right? Like it's
Yep.
like they're
Yes,
not doing
exactly.
anything crazy. And so are the NFL. Like I got to spend some time at combine training with Les Spellman, who works with some of the best in the country, Tony Villani, who works with some of the best in the country, and they are teaching the same principles to those guys. And the basics, man, like the speed work they do for the 40 is like it's really basic, and there's no like secret level unlocked when you get these higher levels. It's just like
Right.
let's get better at the basics and continue to build on that base that you've built as a youth athlete. Yeah. So that's huge. And I think that's, even if you can just take that nugget as a parent, know what you're looking for when you're going and looking for strength and conditioning programs or getting involved or whatever, that's huge to know.
I think
Go
on
ahead.
that though, is if so I have a 9-year-old daughter that she's not super into athletics yet. She's a little gymnast and is really, really good at tumbling and stuff. And she's starting to get more into it and is playing basketball this year and soccer, and she's getting there. But if I was to take her and look for a strength and conditioning program, I think the biggest thing I would be looking at is I want to go find somebody who knows how to progress things over time. And so what I mean is that if I'm going to go work with somebody, I want them to show me how are you going to progress training for the next year or two or the next 6 months or however long my daughter's going to be training with you. Because I think that's where I struggle with some of the coaches and people I've seen is that you can see the highlights of stuff online or social media, or I'll talk to my athletes that are going to coach X, Y, or Z, and they're just throwing crap at the wall and hoping something sticks with their athletes, and they're kind of making it up as they go. And so for me, I think if I were to talk to a parent specifically, I would say like look for progression of training over time, and it's progression of training not only in the weight room but speed and agility and that kind of thing as well. What kind of plyometrics are you going to start my athlete with, and how are you going to progress that? What kind of speed training are you and sprinting type stuff are you going to work with my athlete with? And then what kind of lifting are you going to start with, and how is that going to progress? Because as bad as some of these parents of the 6th, 7th grade stud athlete, like they want them to be doing the same thing that the college athletes are doing or the NFL athletes are doing, like that's just not, they need to start still at ground zero and work up, because that's how those amazing college athletes or amazing pro athletes started as well. Like you can't burn the steak and jump into it going right into super intense training. Like those kids still need to build their bodies and still need to build the groundwork and the preparation. So I think that's, if you do have parents that are listening to this, I think that's the biggest thing is find a coach that knows how to progress training over time.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of good coaches that do that.
Yeah. And I would add to that too, like all those points of like being able to have a conversation with the coach and they can kind of walk you through at least, what the progression is going to look like. And I would just warn, like, don't go out there looking for like sexy, right? Like it needs to be the basics. If they're doing stuff that you see on Instagram all the time with your athletes all the time, you're probably in the wrong spot. So, strength and conditioning, you always feel like as a coach, it's a battle. You're like, man, this has got to be getting boring because you're going through it like 5 times a day with different groups of kids. But you have to just keep in mind, like that's the type of work they need to do. And I think as a coach or a young coach, I got caught up a lot. Like I'd get bored with what we were doing,
Yeah,
right? And be like, man,
100%.
I'm like, we need to do something different. We need to do something, a little more exciting. And just like anything in life, like getting really good at just the basics and having consistency, especially with youth athletes, like they need consistency with movements to build the ability and the movement capacity and the understanding of the movement and just neurologically how to perform it. Like if you're changing the variation you're doing every week, or you're changing the movement you're doing every couple weeks, it's really hard for them to get in tune with how to move and then create that pattern. So that's what I would add to that. Yeah, love it. Awesome. Okay, so at the end, I always kind of ask two questions. I gave you a little forewarning, so hopefully you thought about it a little bit today. What is something that you've changed your mind on significantly throughout your career as a coach?
I think maxing is something I've changed my mind on. I was I was very because at the college level we didn't max our athletes ever. We would at the most do a 5 or a 3 rep max, and it was just to track so that we could give an RPE to work off of and percentage to work off of. And I was so against maxing, felt like it was useless and whatnot. But there is some effect and there is some buy-in with maxing, and then I've kind of changed how I look at it. Is that so I'm lucky to have been able to fundraise and get some tools to max in a different way here. So we sprint and we do fly 10 sprints, and we try to max out our miles per hour. And we do that about every 12 weeks. We'll retest and do those tests or those maxing out. We do the same thing. We have a jump mat here. So it's not, I mean, I know the jump mat isn't the most like, what's the word? Like the most scientific tool,
Yeah.
but it does give you a number, right? And so we'll max out doing that. And we do max a few lifts, but we do it in an appropriate way. And because our high school kids, they like it, it's fun, it's something to look forward to. And then two, what creates buy-in is because we do a lot of the same stuff over and over and over again. And we are doing a lot of the basics repeatedly. But when a kid in 6 weeks knows I'm going to max on this lift, like, and then they get to that day, they max and their numbers have gone up, like that's a huge buy-in. Then it's like, oh, all that basic stuff we were doing forever that was really boring and frustrating was really, really good. And so I think that's a really useful tool that I honestly at the college level didn't find much value with maxing and stuff, because I was there to create the best swimmer I could or the best golfer I could or whatever sport athlete I was working with. Whereas for the mindset has changed that I can track maxes a little bit and create buy-in, and it's a huge way for me to create some buy-in, especially with a high school athlete. It's something they can look forward to and work on. And so I don't hate it. We do it in a very different way than most places. We don't have a big 1 rep max party with the music blaring and stuff like that. But we do max, and I teach the athletes how to max. And usually we're doing a 3 or 5 rep max, but we do it to create some buy-in and to track numbers over time, and to, like we talked about with long-term athletic development, to see how the progression and how we've improved over time.
Yeah. I love it. And we're the same way. 3 to 5 reps is where that's the lowest we really go with our athletes. Our answer to that that's where we started the isometric pull. It's just a really easy, safe way to just get a gauge of like total strength and force they can produce and how quickly. So that was our answer to it. Cause I agree with you. Buy-in's everything, right? Like,
right.
Whatever way you can find to get athletes to create that buy-in. And that's where, speed training's been great for us too, because we run the fly, and the more ways that you can find ways for them to be successful and max out and invest in like tracking and having the tools to track it, it really just creates like an experience where, they can get feedback pretty frequently and keep them bought into the process. And I think an important thing to highlight is like, that is the difference too. Like in a college setting, you kind of just expect that buy-in because they're there, right? And it's like they're getting their school, whatever. You're part of a college program. You're probably getting your school paid for. You're getting some kind of perks, benefits. It's like, and if you're not bought in, there's 10 kids lined up behind you that are bought in. So high school is a whole nother setting where, not only we're trying to help these athletes get to the next level, but we're also just trying to create resilient, great human beings. And they, it's just part of something they've done their whole life. It's not necessarily something that they even want to do sometimes. So it's like, how can we as coaches build that value and buy-in? And even if it doesn't result in a college scholarship, it's like, number one, doing basic things a lot and it gets annoying, but then you get to see some progress. That's life, right?
Yeah.
that's exactly how life plays out. And if they don't go play college, if I can get a kid to fall in love with like training for performance and they'll continue to do that on their own for the rest of their lives or for, the next 10, 15 years, that'll put them so
Yes.
much farther ahead in life, and they'll be able to teach their friends, loved ones, kids in the future. Like there's just so much trajectory you can change in their life by getting them to love the process of physically and mentally getting better.
And I think to add to that is just that, like, so I do have kids chasing numbers in our weight room at Rigby High School, but in our facility, not our weight room, right? Because they're chasing a higher vertical jump and they're chasing a faster miles per hour. Like there are kids that when they come into to the facility after school, when they don't have to be there, they don't go to lift and try to increase their squat or increase their bench. And I still have the bros that want to do that here and there, but I have kids that are coming to do extra sprint work and extra jump work and work on that stuff. And that's the numbers that's the culture I've tried to create, is that those are the numbers we're trying to chase, is a better vertical jump and a faster mile per hour time.
Yeah. And I would say those correlate better to sport performance for sure. Like
Exactly.
I know so many weight room warriors that never saw the field, right? So
Yeah.
it's like those numbers I think are better to chase because everything that's going to go into getting those numbers higher is a much more broad base of like type of work you're going to have to do versus just like getting your back squat up 5 pounds, 10 pounds, whatever, right? So
100%. Yeah.
awesome. And then last question, what rabbit hole are you currently going down, like in your own personal study or readings or any information you're diving into lately?
I've looked into a lot of, or read about a lot, just about breathing and breath work. There's a book that I'm currently reading called The Oxygen Advantage. That's, I guess it's probably 15 years old at this point. And then there's some guys on Twitter and stuff that I've seen that they do like training with their athletes where they have them take their mouth or things of that nature. And so I found some of that interesting. And so Oxygen Advantage is where I've started. And it's led me to even try some of the things in my own life, like with like taping my mouth when I sleep or different things like that, to try to build my own VO2 max. Because and I'm not super far into it with Oxygen Advantage, but some of the reading I've done online or the rabbit hole I've gone down is just that you can improve your VO2 max and your ability to recover and your ability to use the air you breathe. You can improve that without training it. Like if you can just teach yourself to breathe better through your nose in a natural way. And if you can kind of change and create those natural habits when you sleep, you're going to get better sleep. Your heart rate's going to be better and increase, or your heart rate variability is going to increase and be better. Just your total general recovery between sets or between sprints, between jumps, in between quarters, or whatever it is you're doing is going to be better as well. So that's something I find super interesting. And I've started to see a lot of my athletes, my kids that are heavy mouth breathers, and you can kind of see it too when these kids are struggling compared to the kids that naturally breathe better through their nose and are more efficient in their breathing. But it is something I find super interesting. I don't know how I'll apply it at the high school level when I have 40 athletes on our indoor track or on our turf or the weight room. Like, I'm not sure exactly how I could apply that and help my athletes, but it is something I find super interesting because I think there are some kids that it would give especially some of those basketball players or the guys that are playing two ways in football or track and field especially, would be huge. So I'm not sure exactly how to approach it, but I find it super interesting for my own life and for my athletes.
Yeah, the best way to approach it is if you own a mouth taping company and you're listening to this podcast,
Yeah,
sponsor Justin Burch.
that
He'll
would be
turn
sweet.
he'll turn 40 track kids into future purchasers of your
That
mouth
would be,
taping. You're right.
yeah,
That's interesting you bring that up because I've been mouth taping for about a year and a half now and has made some big changes in terms of even just like I used to have one nostril that felt like it couldn't bring in as much air all the time. Like I would notice it. And I don't ever like it's gone now. Like I can breathe through both my nostrils pretty well. And yeah, I have a good VO2 max and I don't really do a lot of long aerobic stuff on my bike, but outside of mountain biking, it's sprinting and lifting. And I just feel generally better all the time, and my sleep's better and whatnot. So I think there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of research too on, mouth breathers, nose breathers, and moving between the different, parasympathetic states and being relaxed and being active, right? So I think an athlete's, another tool in the bag can be the ability to calm the heart rate back down and stay as relaxed as possible between plays. And there's a lot of research on, the way that you're pulling air in is going to dictate a lot of that. Because when we start breathing through our mouth, it's actually like a fight or flight response typically. So it's like when you get in a situation where your body's preparing for over oxygenation, like you're going to have to sprint from a bear, right? So you're trying to get as much oxygen in as possible. So
And
yeah,
the
there's a lot
instances
to
of
it.
cramping and things like that, like it should help. Like, and it is something that the kids I have that are always so tight and that cramp a lot, there's usually a correlation. I have no idea of what the causations are, and I need to do more research, but it's super interesting. And I'm working on trying to start my PhD program and work. I'd like to do a PhD in exercise science and have applied for a program and stuff. And that's something like that I would love to research going forward and be able to kind of hone in, because I think that would be just a huge low hanging fruit. If you could teach a kid how to breathe better, that would be insane, because there's so many of those low hanging fruits that we have. Like, obviously we can sprint a couple times a week. That's a good low hanging fruit. Kids will get faster if we sprint a couple times a week. If we lift a couple times a week, they'll get stronger. But
Mm-hmm.
then if we could teach them to breathe better, like, they're definitely going to recover better. And so that would be such a good low hanging fruit, and something that hopefully I can find ways to apply those to teams.
Yeah, I love it. And I think if you're a meathead listening to this and you just like to lift weights, I think there's also a lot to be said about learn how to breathe through your nose and, getting fully through using your diaphragm and getting good at breathing for like when you're lifting weights and bracing
Right.
and core and
No
trunk
doubt.
stability. So I think there's an application to any living, walking person on this earth. So I love it, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sweet.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you coming on. It was
Yeah. Thank you.
informative. If there's some parents or athletes or listeners that would like to, learn a little bit more about you or connect with you, where would you send them?
So just my Instagram or Twitter, I believe they're both just Justin H. Burch, and I'm the Rigby High Strength and Conditioning Coach, and I've been there. I'm also the National High School Strength and Conditioning Association's director for the state of Idaho as well. So there's a few avenues to connect with me, and happy to talk to anybody anytime about training, and especially athletes getting better and improving over time. That's something like I love doing. So
Okay, perfect.
cool.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.